We are building up towards the local government election, which is a year away, and a year goes pretty quickly. And one of the areas that's been hotly disputed for a while has been the city of Tshwane, where we watched the change of the guard, where Action SA flipped and gave the city of Tshwane to the ANC and the EFF and to themselves. And the mayor who got kicked out unceremoniously was Cilliers Brink, and he's with us today. Cilliers, welcome back.
Mike, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes.
I'm glad that you're there. Now, you are leader of the opposition in the city of Tshwane.
Yes.
Is the view a little bit different from that side of the
Yeah, well, the DA's got a lot of experience in opposition.
Yes.
You know, and my decision was I'm in this for the long haul. It would have been quite easy to take up a seat in Parliament or the provincial legislature and leave the slog work of opposition to somebody else. But the change that happened when our administration and our coalition partners were sold out by Action SA to bring the ANC to power in Tshwane wasn't an election result. It wasn't the will of the voters expressed at the ballot box. It was political chessboard pieces being moved around. And it is important to remember that the voters will have the final say. So in the 18 months that I was the mayor, that we did have a stable coalition, that we did embark upon a program to change the city, to improve services, to improve the finances of the city, that was good work, and I would like for the opportunity to finish that work.
Yeah, so you're not going anywhere. You're going to be around the city of Tshwane for the time being, eh?
I'm going to be around, and I recently had my selection panel interview because, you know, nobody is guaranteed a position in the DA. We're not like Action SA where the founder or the boss just decides who runs your municipal caucus. We actually have procedures. You know, even Helen Zille, if she wants to be the mayor of Joburg, needs to go through a selection panel. I think it went well, and I really look forward to going into an election, depending on the outcome of that selection panel, and offering a prospectus based on our experience, plus some of the new insights that I've come to. And that's maybe one of the benefits of not being in government. You know, Henry Kissinger said most people who are in high office don't learn anything because you don't really have time to reflect. You go into high office with what you know, and if you don't know a lot, then you don't grow that capital or that intellectual capital while in office. But some time to reflect in quieter times is important sometimes.
You brought up the rumor that's swirling about Helen Zille potentially throwing her hat into the ring as mayor of Johannesburg. Now, I do understand that's it's all talk at this stage. What was your first thoughts about this? Is this part of the plan, or is this just talk?
So I think Helen has actually confirmed to the newspapers that she's considering it and that she will have to talk to her family and so forth. And we have to emphasize the point that no single person in the DA has the power just to say, I want that nomination and just to take it, not even Helen Zille. She will have to face a selection panel who potentially has members who don't like her or don't agree with her ideas, who won't accept her answers. Of course, this is a person with a great deal of experience in public service. She's led a city, she's led a province, she's kept up to date through the DA governance unit with what's happening in the municipalities and in the coalitions. She's got a good sense of the values and the worldview which must prevail in order to turn a city around. Somebody told me, but you know, can't you guys just get somebody from the private sector? And my first response to that is, running Joburg doesn't require a technical innovation. It requires political leadership, a grasp of the fight for power that goes on in every department, in every institution. It's behavior that has to change. It's not some oven-ready corporate strategy that you can just implement. And you know, there the technical solution is offered. So I think obviously a compelling candidate. I think we've got a very strong caucus leader in Johannesburg. And whatever the outcome of the selection panel process, there is local talent in Joburg, and our key thing in Joburg, I think, is just to get the voters motivated enough to actually go to the ballot box. Because many people have become confused with coalitions. You know, you've had how many mayors? Tshwane has had how many mayors? Who exactly is in charge of Joburg? It's become clearer that the ANC and its different factions essentially fight for Joburg, and that's a big part of the problem. But many people, I think yourself included, have become demotivated, and especially for folks who don't pay attention to every single move in politics, maybe having an outsider, smash the odds and get people to the ballot box might be what you need.
Yeah, because my view has been, and I know you and I had a spirited discussion about this when you were in the middle of your fight, that sometimes it looks to me like the DA has perhaps lost the stomach for the rough and tumble of upcountry politics, which is not pretty. And you guys are writing strongly worded letters to the editor and to Parliament, and they're busy burning the place down, right?
Well, I think, having your chairperson of the FedEx basically decide to, hand over that position to somebody else, and in her, twilight years of her life when she could be playing with her grandkids coming up from Cape Town to turn around the city of Johannesburg. That's not a political move that you make because you've got ambitions. It's because you're willing to make sacrifices. And I think, even though Helen must obviously still decide, and just consult her family, and the processes must run its course, the fact that there's interest shows you how very important Johannesburg is, not just to the DA, but to the country. It is the economic heartland.
Yes.
And the crumbling infrastructure in Johannesburg has got national economic implications for the country. But more than that, the fact that folks seem to be losing hope in Joburg is bad for democracy.
Yeah.
And I think if your point of view was the DA doesn't care about Joburg, and having a situation where one of the big beasts of the party is willing to relocate because they care so much for Joburg, might disprove that point.
When it comes to getting around South Africa, Pace Car Rental makes it easy. Whether it's a quick run to the airport, a month-long rental for business, or a vehicle to help grow your hustle, Pace has the right wheels right when you need them. With a wide range of reliable cars, vans and bakkies, flexible rental terms, and friendly service you can count on, South Africans trust Pace to keep them moving. Plus, use promo code SONA and get a special discount on your next rental, because every journey deserves a head start. Reliable, affordable, proudly local. Pace Car Rental.
Yeah, let's hope so. But one can't help thinking, though, Cilliers, I think you put your finger on it there. Johannesburg is, the beating heart of the South African economy. We can't have the biggest city falling to rack and ruin as it is right now. But yet we've heard almost, we've entered into the government of national unity is a year old. It's in nobody's interests from a national perspective, even though this is local government. It's you wouldn't have the American president not giving a damn if New York was falling into disrepute.
Yeah.
Right. But yet we haven't heard much from your leader or your cabinet ministers about Johannesburg. They seem to be silent and quite happy to ride on plane trips to America.
So I am part of a committee of the DA in Gauteng called the Ready to Govern Committee, the Governance Committee. And our job is essentially to look at the financials, the infrastructure, the service delivery, the personnel, the policies of each of the municipalities in the province, and to say, what changes do we need to make once we're in power in order to show people that not only can we govern, not only can we turn things around, but that it is worth the vote. Because that's the big risk for democracy. If people conclude that because of the coalition chaos, my vote doesn't matter, that's when democracy basically goes to hell. And that's what we have to avoid. So I can confirm, as somebody who is part of that committee, part of the structures in the DA in Gauteng, we care deeply about Johannesburg. I think clearly Helen Zille, who's a resident of Cape Town, cares deeply about the future of Johannesburg. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say if we can't turn Joburg around, it's really bad for the country as a whole. Now, let me get to the question about the government of national unity. We can agree at this stage that the DA's participation in the GNU is tactical, not strategic. In other words, tactical in that it forms part of a set of measures which the party takes in order to fight for our constituency. The DA has been more successful in court fighting against government than arguably we have in our attempts to change policy. Now, you might blame the DA for that, but at least we're in there trying. Solly Malatsi is in there fighting for equity equivalence so that we might have greater fixed investment in the country, so that we might have growth, so that we might have jobs. But our ability to influence policy is severely limited at present. And what is needed is for the ANC to be cut down to size even further. 40% of the vote is too much for them to handle. They need 30% of the vote, or even less. And so this next election is just as important as the court case against the Expropriation Act, as the court case against those crazy, hard race quotas in the Employment Equity Amendment Act. Just as important as the court case against the NHI. Because if you don't have the power, if there isn't a proper platform for you to deliver on, then politics becomes a lot of talking instead of action and showing people results.
But it's a hell of an indictment that you're in partnership with this government and your only action is legal action, that you can't actually bring them around to your way of thinking or behaving like it's some kind of partnership.
Well, if we could call the shots, if we could force the ANC to implement an agreement which clearly they've disregarded, and you've had Tony Leon on your show, he was open. He said, we had a mediocre agreement that formed the government of national unity, but it's one tactical consideration amongst many others forming part of a strategy. And the strategy is offer South Africa an alternative to the future. Yes, you have to sit in partnership. I mean, and I feel most deeply for DA deputy ministers, very diligent folk like Ashur Sarapin and Andrew Whitfield, who have to serve under ANC ministers, more so the case trade and industry than finance, who are just so ideologically inflexible that they don't want to consider that their policies have failed. And the important point is this is no ordinary partnership. It is a tactical consideration. The DA will do what we can. And I think if the party then decides that our continued participation in the government of national unity is actively causing harm, the party will consider its position at that time. But I do want to emphasize this point. Rescuing South Africa, keeping that promise to the voters that we made in the election is not going to just depend on serving in government. We have to fight on a far wider front. And I think that's exactly what we're doing.
So do you think then it was tactically astute for the leader of the Democratic Alliance to bail out the President Cyril Ramaphosa as they sat in the Oval Office and defend him better than any of his own people could defend him in terms of being held accountable for the appalling situation in South Africa when it comes to, to offer the answer of saying, we don't have a white genocide, in fact, we're killing everybody. Yeah. And yet your leader then comes to his defense.
Well, I think it was an incredibly difficult decision to make. Do you go with Cyril Ramaphosa or not? You have Johan Rupert going, you've got Ernie Els going, you've got other prominent South Africans going. And if the Minister of Agriculture and the leader of the second biggest party in government were to simply decline the request and folks were to ask, where is John? I think that would have been very difficult. So there is a national interest to represent, and it's clearly in the country's national interest that industries that depend on access to American markets aren't penalized for the faults of the ANC government. There clearly is that case to make. And even if you speak to AfriForum, their request is don't punish the country, don't punish industries, rather target individuals within the ANC. it's a similar position that Helen Suzman was in when she was leader of the Progressives, opposed to apartheid, and yet also opposed to economic sanctions because, yes, it would have hurt the regime back then, but it would also have hurt ordinary South Africans. So to say that John Steenhuisen's choice in whether to go or not to go was an easy and simple one. Now, let's talk about what happened there. You're quite right.
Yeah, his support was enthusiastic.
Well,
I couldn't have seen Helen Suzman enthusiastically bailing out John Vorster
well,
if he was in the White House.
Let's talk about the president first and you know, the way that he was put on the spot. What was interesting to me is that Cyril Ramaphosa is clearly not used to being called to account. He was completely baffled. He didn't know how to answer. And the upshot of the answer there was, no, there isn't targeted violence against any one racial group. Yeah. All of us are under it. I mean, the criminal justice system is deteriorating. It's made worse by economic decline. Our per capita GDP in 2023 was at the level of 2008. So, in other words, our population has been outgrowing the economy, and our population isn't even growing at the rate of Angola or Zimbabwe or these other countries. So it was an indictment of the president, the fact that he couldn't get himself to condemn the singing of that song as un-South African. To me, that was very disappointing. Never mind what the Constitutional Court said. The president has got an independent constitutional responsibility to promote national unity. And I think if he were to be called out in that meeting on anything, it could have been, Mr. President, I think it's clearly unacceptable that anybody sings that song. We must, as a government and as a country, condemn its singing. John Steenhuisen made the point that rural safety must be a priority, that the attacks on farmers, whether black or white, is a terrible problem. It doesn't help calling it a white genocide if both black and white farmer workers get attacked. And I think he did as best he could in very difficult circumstances. I mean, I don't like President Cyril Ramaphosa. I don't like the way that he spoke. I don't like the condescending tone in how he referred to my white Minister of Agriculture as if John serves there at his pleasure. He doesn't. He serves there in terms of a coalition agreement. The president was elected in terms of a coalition agreement. But of course, you know, you've got limited opportunities. And I think the fact that we now have at least some reforms in the Department of Communication with regards to the equity equivalents that have to be considered to the hard race-based ownership requirements under BEE regulation is at least some progress. And we'll have to see if South Africa's agenda following that meeting is advanced at all.
Okay, which brings us back to local government, because at the end of the day, most politics is local. And, you know, you operate in that sphere. And it's safe to say that, you know, the state of Gauteng metros is ridiculous. It's so bad, it has to be seen to be believed. I haven't heard John Steenhuisen saying anything about local government in Gauteng, about the metros.
Oh, no, I think John has spoken about the situation in Johannesburg. I can't quote him chapter and verse, but obviously the leader doesn't have to speak about everything. We have a party with representation at every sphere of government. And as I mentioned before, we in Gauteng are preparing in a very serious way for government. Just like our coalition agreements, although they weren't successful because of Action SA in 2021, were far better than our coalition agreements in 2016. So our program for government in 2026 will be far better than 2021. And that program will not just focus on what did the DA do in Cape Town to deliver in 2006, because our circumstances now in Gauteng metros is completely different from what you had in Cape Town in 2006. And I'd really like to talk about some of those solutions to water, electricity, and the things affecting ordinary people. But the point is, in order to deliver in our system, can't just have the mayor, but not a working majority in council. That's a hostage situation. You have to have the mayor, and then you have to have council control, which either means a DA majority, as we have in Midvaal, or a coalition that is broadly ideologically coherent, that have people of integrity at the decision-making table, and that can stand together when difficult decisions have to be made. I certainly have quite a lot of experience in making difficult decisions.
So what are some of those solutions for some of the crises that we've got?
So, if you read Business Day a week or so ago, the headline story was that in the past 15 years, personnel-related expenditure has gone up exponentially. And spending on infrastructure has gone down in tandem. So, more on salaries for employees, more on appointments, less and less on electricity substations, on water treatment plants, on pipe replacements, on the things that affect the lives of ordinary people. Tshwane is the one city which in our 18 months of my administration took a very active decision to try, if not buck this trend, at least bring a bit of a correction. 2023, the council decided, interestingly with the ANC support, with Action SA's support, to forego salary increases, not to take money away, not withhold money, but just to freeze salary increases for 1 year. Which
like it's been done in the private sector.
Like it's been done, anyone in the private sector would say, okay, well, it's unfortunate, but if you're going through a difficult time, you take extraordinary measures. In Tshwane, of course, it caused a strike. The strike lasted 3 months. It was violent. It was unprotected. There were waste removal trucks burnt. There were employees intimidated. One instance of attempted murder. The interesting thing is, after I was removed at the end of September last year, the ANC-led coalition did not withdraw our court case in the Labour Court because, we had a dispute with the Bargaining Council. The Bargaining Council decided against us. They said you can't withhold salary increases. We went to the Labour Court, made the case. There's an exemption clause in the collective agreement. Municipalities that can't afford to pay increases should not be forced to pay increases in all circumstances. It's an exceptional case. It's not going to happen every year. And the ANC, having kept that case in the Labour Court decided in favour of the city of Tshwane. This didn't get nearly as much media attention as it should have, because it establishes that very important principle, that when you are running out of money to fund infrastructure, there has to be a difficult decision to say, we're going to bring personnel-related expenditure under control. Now, if we talk about infrastructure, I have started thinking in new ways about something like water. A municipality buys water from Rand Water. In the case of Tshwane, there are 1 or 2 more service providers. We also do our own water purification. But then in distributing that water, the pipes, the bills that you send out to your consumers, a lot of that water gets lost or people don't pay for the water. It's called distribution losses. In Johannesburg, I think it's between 45 and 50% of the water procured from Rand Water by Joburg for onward provision to residents gets lost because there are leaks, because valves aren't replaced. And so what you need to fix that situation is a whole lot of capital from the private sector that gets managed in a proper way, that avoids the corruption that has tainted the supply chains of government. And I believe, just like we've spoken about private concessions for rail and for ports, to get that private sector expertise and capital in, to give a 30 or 40-year concession, we must consider the same for water. This country has got 2 private water concessions, one in Kwadukuza, Belito, and the other one in Mbombela, Nelspruit. And if you look at those concessions granted in 1999, before all of these complicated local government regulations, the distribution losses, the leaks, are less compared to municipalities, and the collection rate what you actually get your consumers to pay is higher. And I think this is the kind of courageous new ways we have to think about infrastructure spending. Vulindlela, ports and railways, all good. But unless we bring that to capital spending in the municipalities, we won't get the infrastructure spend, we won't get the value for money, and services won't improve.
Now, in the aftermath of your removal as mayor, and one of the problems that has dogged the city of Tshwane was water, the water treatment plant Rooiwal, which even
Yes.
I've got to know about. Suddenly the Minister of Water pitched up, but only after you left.
No, not quite. The Minister of Water, the previous Minister of Water, who's now the Minister of Police, after I was elected as mayor, I took the first opportunity to reach out to him, and we had a chance to meet on the sidelines of a sanitation workshop in Cape Town. And he was very, very encouraging. And in between my initial meeting with him, we agreed that the city and national government must work together to address the problem of Hammanskraal water, the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant. And us actually forming a committee, there was an outbreak of cholera. And that outbreak, tragic loss of life, had the effect of spurring both of us into action. And that partnership actually led to national government building a modular treatment plant at Klipdrift with the support of Magalies Water. And although this ANC coalition has dragged its feet on the Hammanskraal water project, that partnership between me and Senzo that was concluded back in 2023 is the basis for that solution. So I wouldn't say that has come about recently. The key now is for Tshwane to deliver on that promise, because the package plant has been built by national government, the water is available, but the city still needs to do things on its side to make sure the pipes are flushed, to make sure the technical issues are addressed before folks have the water in their taps.
Okay. So now if one looks at and I know it's not you've sort of been there in the city of Tshwane, but looking down the road here to poor old Johannesburg, there seems to have been a situation that has emerged, which is sort of counterintuitive, since the election of the national election in the middle of last year, where, if possible, service delivery has declined, at an accelerated rate. What does one do in the case of a city where the city fathers are just not even attempting to do their work?
Well, firstly, you've got to replace the city fathers with new city fathers or city mothers, as the case may be. And it is important that people realize that the failure to deliver since the ANC was removed from power, although much of the disaster that still is brought forth comes from contracts and people appointed in the ANC era. I mean, that's the damnosa hereditas of the ANC, the damned legacy with which they've left us. There are still networks of service providers, deployed cadres, union leaders, and ANC faction bosses who are working together to make sure that value chains are captured. And Action SA and the parties that voted for ANC mayors have continued to enable that. But if you have a mayor who is strong, who has got integrity, who is willing to make unpopular calls, and you've got a sufficient majority in the council. Remember, your budget, your city manager appointments, dismissal of senior officials, raising of long-term loans, passing of bylaws, changing of certain key policies, all depend on you mustering enough votes in a council. And if you don't have enough votes, you've got to negotiate with a corrupt EFF who want their cousin to be appointed as a COO, or with the ANC who want somebody else to get a contract. And then things don't change. So we've got to reduce the ANC to the smallest possible portion of the vote. We've got to turn out DA voters and make sure that there's a basis upon which to deliver. Then the next step is who you appoint as the city manager is probably the most important decision you can make. In Johannesburg, you have a lot of entities. You don't have that many entities in Tshwane. So it means the entity boards and those appointments become as important as the appointment of a city manager. What we achieved in Tshwane was to appoint a competent, apolitical, professional core of managers. But that's not enough. For those folks to get proper management control of the city, you've got to then look at the next level of management and the next. But once you get control, you can get productivity from your workforce. You can limit distribution losses. You can make sure that the municipality collects what is due to it. And that gives you a beachhead. Because once you've got cash in the bank, you can start spending that money on infrastructure. Once your credit rating improves, you can access capital markets and again spend money on infrastructure. And once your infrastructure improves, then the service delivery experience by residents improves. And that goes hand in hand with the productivity of the workforce. You know, I was in Cape Town the other day with the member of the Mayoral Committee for Community Safety, JP Smith, and he demonstrated to me the system that they now have in place for their Metro Police, where every Metro Police car is tracked in real time. You know, like you would see an Uber on a screen. Cape Town's command in the Metro Police can at any given time see where the entire Metro Police force is. People are dedicated to certain areas. If you then have a call in a particular area, you look at what cars you have in that area, you dispatch it. You've got body cams, you've got dash cams collecting evidence in real time. That doesn't end up in a docket that then gets lost at the magistrate's court. It's saved to the cloud. They are deploying drones. But I mean, the point is, if you've got control of your workforce, if you've got a dispatch and monitoring system where electronically you can see where everyone that works for the city are, you've got a far better chance of those people feeling motivated, feeling empowered, and then delivering value for people's money.
Yeah, look, I just got a point of order. We know exactly where our Metro Police are in Johannesburg. They're in a roadblock on Winnie Mandela Drive on any given day. That's like the only place you find them. And they're all together. Every single Metro policeman is there, but they never had a traffic light that's not working. Let's switch attention now to the Auditor General's report, because that came out recently, and it was a shocker. 1 metro out of 8 got a clean audit. That was the city of Cape Town. And everywhere else got a declining report.
Yeah. The city of Tshwane did not get a decline, didn't step back, but it got the same outcome. When I was elected mayor, the city at that stage had an adverse audit finding, which is close to the worst that you can get. The worst is called a disclaimer, which means they can't even find the paper to make sense of it. But we took Tshwane from an adverse to a qualified, the next step up. And unfortunately, the city obtained another qualified opinion. The reason for that is the city's handling of fixed assets. The city hasn't got a complete asset register. And by the time that the audit was done, the city had not addressed all of the critical issues which the AG had flagged, very technical issues in what is called property, plant, and equipment. There is, of course, also concern about escalating irregular expenditure. And very often, that irregular expenditure, because it's something that you also declare proactively, will go up before it goes down. If you put a diligent city manager in place, and you say to that city manager, make sure that if there's irregular expenditure, that you declare it proactively. You don't wait for the Auditor General to come and to point out the massive difference between what you've declared and what is actually in place. But that's not enough. Obviously, you've got to put in place measures then to reduce it. And to me, Mike, the most important thing is the quality of the officials who do the reporting, who do the work, who attend to the systems. I mean, we've got wonderful technology these days that can do wondrous things. But if that technology can be manipulated, where there's a workaround, and if the uptake of that technology is undermined by the people that you have in place, then it becomes almost worthless.
Yeah. Now it looks like we've got a battle on our hands between, if you want to call it, the bad guys who want to just disrupt the system and take everything you can out of it, And, Johannesburg's heading down that road of eThekwini, Mangaung, Buffalo City, where, what did that Crispin, whatever his name is, from the Eastern Cape, called
Alva.
How to Steal a City.
Yeah, Chippy Alva.
He didn't do anything about it, but he wrote a book. Well done, Chippy.
I think he tried. He tried, to be fair to him.
He
Good
could have tried a bit harder, but anyway. The point is that, we see now Joburg hurtling down that road. One would imagine city of Tshwane is not exactly building on the good work that was done in the past, and that's got the same groups of people in charge.
Yeah, just to comment on Chippy Alva and what he tried to do in Nelson Mandela Bay, and then wrote a book about it. If you read that book, it's a very interesting book and quite unique in the story that it tells, how to steal a city. But in the end, you could put a clever chap there based on his ANC credentials. But if the clever chap doesn't have the backing of the political leadership, then technical knowledge and, good intentions are reduced to nothing. You really need political backing, political change. And I thought I'd make that point. My fear of what is happening in Tshwane is that the Joburg model of government is slowly but surely being implemented. First opportunity this new mayor from the ANC coalition had to have budget input was the budget adjustment. Biggest changes: increase spending on water tankers by 64% compared to what we had budgeted at the beginning of the year, with 3 months left of the financial year. This happened in February. Security companies increased spending by 103% compared to what we had budgeted at the beginning of the financial year. Now, I went through a strike as mayor where property had been destroyed, water pipes had been smashed, teams were too afraid to attend to water leaks, and even in that period, we didn't spend that much money on water tankers and security companies. And it confirms that Nasipi Moya and Action SA are proxies for the ANC and the EFF and the factions, same bunch that run Joburg, and so we're seeing the same results. To fund that 64% increase for water tankers and the 103% increase for security companies, they took away money from water and electricity. And that's why you now have prolonged power outages. I believe in the term of this mayor, we've had more and more prolonged power outages than ever before. And it's not because the mayor is good or a bad person. It's because she's recommended poor choices to the council, and those choices now have bad results for residents. We have an ANC member of the mayoral committee who openly says, no, what we're doing is we're taking money away from the suburbs and we're going to spend it in the townships. But the reality is, folks in the townships wonder where this money is. Where is this money that the ANC has redistributed? And that is almost a narrative for the ANC. The ANC's narrative, politically, nationwide, is all redistribution. Don't worry about growth. Just redistribute. And in redistributing, the folks who do the redistribution take their cut, and the ones that depend on the so-called redistribution don't get the benefit. And so you end up in a cycle of decline.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very worried that is what is happening in Tshwane.
Because it also erodes from your revenue base, which is going to come from the people you're taking the services away from.
Yeah, and you're destroying goodwill. Folks aren't just going to pay. In Tshwane, there's also now a new tax, a city cleansing levy. And our argument was, all right, argue for a specific levy to clean city streets. But is this now the best time to implement it when you already have so much of debt owed to the city that's not being collected? Maybe we should focus on that and focus on improving the services and stabilizing the finances of the city before you implement a new levy. Because for heaven's sakes, the services in Tshwane aren't at the level of a city of Cape Town that can consider such possibilities. And what you would then expect, if I charge you a levy and I raise 500 million rand from it, which is what Tshwane will do from the city cleansing levy, then you must increase your budget for the Department of Cleaning the City with 500 million. Doesn't that make sense?
That's
what the ANC coalition has gone and done, they're raising the money and they've cut the budget for cleaning the city. So what message does that send to municipal consumers, to ratepayers? Is you will pay more, but we'll deliver less. And it destroys goodwill. It destroys that relationship that you have with the best paying consumers of your city. Say, no, we don't really care about you. And in the meantime, nobody but the politicians and the service providers benefit from decisions like that.
Which sort of brings us to the point of, we do have a problem in South Africa of inequality, and that is an inequality of people that pay taxes. Right? A lot of those people, the same would go even to the national budget. We've got the similar people funding cities as well through rates and so on. At what point do those rate payers say enough's enough? And what does that look like? Is there any chance that ratepayers, not getting the services that they pay for, start saying we won't pay our rates?
Well, you want to talk about a rates boycott?
I do.
And I think the reality is we've got widespread tax revolts in this country, including by people who can pay and don't pay. And then the folks who do pay but who struggle come under pressure. But there's also an economic phenomenon called the Laffer curve, which is basically you can tax people and increase your revenue up to a certain point, and then everything falls off a cliff because your consumers can no longer afford to sustain the taxes. They either fall behind, including people who've been paying faithfully, or they find new ways of bucking the responsibility or gaming the system, or, what do you call it? Tampering with bridging the meter. And that, I believe, we are getting close to that. So aside from let's not pay rates and taxes, a campaign to that effect, which I think will have long-term consequences, which we haven't really thought about properly, folks are simply going to reach a point where if government doesn't deliver, if it charges a city cleansing levy, but I still have to clean the streets through the Residents Association, if it puts up rates and taxes, but the roads are just deteriorating and we have to fix our own roads, it isn't providing traffic policing, so we've got to pay security companies to fill the security vacuum, that money spent on that is going to displace the money that is being paid in rates and taxes. I think we're dangerously close to that. And on a bigger scale, when the president, for example, in his newsletter calls on businesses to transform, to recommit themselves, when he defends policies that clearly haven't worked, race-based empowerment policies that have caused the country to be in a glut of growth, where the population is exceeding the rate of economic growth, where government policies have actively created that situation, that reality check needs to set in. And hopefully we can have a change of policy before we have a large-scale tax revolt, or before we reach the Laffer curve at a more catastrophic level for the country.
Now, Cilliers, in closing, we've got a local government election coming up next year. Would you pronounce the Democratic Alliance in good shape in the city of Tshwane for that local government election? Where's your growth going to come from?
So I think the DA has got a very strong chance, if not to become a party with an absolute majority, to at least grow to such an extent that we can have a coalition of 3 or 4 parties instead of the chaotic bunch, instead of having spoilers and ANC sellouts like Action SA we have to depend on, who then stab us in the back and sell out to the comrades and cadres who we have to fight against in the city administration. I really think we're in a good basis to achieve that. Let's look at the election results. if you look at the general election results, remember, you always have to compare general election results with general. You can't compare a general election result with a local election result. If we look at the result in 2014 general election, it significantly raised the call it the tide for the subsequent local government election in 2016. The DA did well in 2014. We did brilliantly in 2016. Now let's look at the next election cycle. 2009, the DA suffered a great setback. 2019. The DA suffered a great setback, especially among traditional voters who are concentrated in a metropolitan area like Pretoria. And that predicted a rather mediocre local government election result in 2021, which unfortunately is what happened. We went back in 2021. Now, in 2014, in Tshwane, 2024, in Tshwane, we've grown 5% compared to 2019. We're almost at that level of 2014 that predicted a great election result. I believe that the DA in Tshwane can get at least 45% of the vote. That will give us a solid basis on which to form a coalition that is reliable and that can see through a program of action, because that's what we need. We need order to counteract the chaos of coalitions. That's when we are able to deliver.
Okay, and then final question. What do you really think of Action SA? Because I'm not kind of understanding. Anyway. Thank you. I think we get that one. Cilliers, thank you so much for coming in. It's always great to speak to you and get your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a local government election coming up, and it is very, very important, because this is the area where most of the stealing is happening right now. It is at local government level, right? All of the money that the Minister of Finance had to raise is insignificant compared to the money that was lost due to irregular expenditure at local government level. In fact, if we could have a tax decrease if our local governments were run properly. But, so think carefully when you vote in the next election. Vote on results, don't vote on other issues. But Cilliers, thank you so much for coming through. Listen, go and support Pace Car Rental. They are keeping us on air. They can give you a discount. We all need a discount on something. So you just use the code SONA. And when you next hire your car, and subscribe to the State of the Nation channel. We'll see you again. Thank you very much for joining us.